Hello and welcome to the PowerFish podcast. I'm Fish.
And I'm Ben. Today we talked about Jordan Peterson, time and space, and its relation to consciousness.
Yo,
And Marques Brownlee.
let's go.
So I had an interesting story today at work. I was delivering to a trailer park.
Nice.
I was taking the package up the steps, and this lovely old lady opens the door, and first, well, I say lovely, but it's not going to sound like it real quick. First, she says, "Now, I'm not looking to get anybody in trouble here, but the other day I had 2 packages delivered, and one was delivered over to there, and another one was delivered over to there." And I'm like, "Wow, what? Now that sounds pretty silly." And she's like, "Yep, sure is." And I'm like, "You both were for this trailer number?" And she was like, "Yep." And they went to those 2 trailers, but luckily they were kind enough to bring them to me. They were so kind. I'm like, "Okay, well, that's good. That's kind of silly that they were in different spots, but you know, is what it is. We're getting heavy. Christmas is upon us. A lot of packages. Mistakes happen." And she looks at me and she said, "Could I give you a Pepsi? Would you take a Pepsi?" And I was like, "Oh, I can't do that. You know, I mean, you're kind, but no, thank you." And she said, "Why can't you?" And I was like, I don't know. I kind of feel bad to take a Pepsi. It's free like that. And she's like, "Well, I'm going to go get one." And I said, "Okay, if you insist." And she said, "I do." And she went back and got a Pepsi. I'm like, this thing's poisoned for sure.
Yeah.
And as she was walking back, she said, come in." And I just basically took one step in the door and left it at that.
Yeah.
And she brought the Pepsi to me and gave it to me. And she said, "You know, I'll tell you what. I am so glad that ain't nobody's bitching about the election no more." Because as we're recording this, it's a few days post-election.
Yeah.
And I said, "You know, I think that's a pretty popular opinion. I think everybody is." And she immediately transitioned into insurance. About how she was getting insurance spam calls. And she said, "You know, those insurance people keep calling me, and I can't say one son of a bitchin' thing to get them to stop."
Son of a bitch thing, huh?
Son of a bitchin', dude. I'm like, wow. I'm like, yeah, they're just like leeches, aren't they? And she's like, damn, they are. I'm like, holy shit, this woman. And I am slowly making my way out, trying to at this point. And yeah, and basically her final words was, "You can't say fuck you to get them to go away. It's like talking to that Pepsi can right there." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's like talking to a brick wall, ain't it?" She's like, "Mm-hmm." And then I was on my way. I just thought, lovely old lady. Clearly, as we stated many episodes ago, a lot of old people have given their away, you know, in early life and don't have any left to give. So I think she was one of them.
That is a fascinating story about a fascinating woman who we should track down and get on the podcast. That's what I think.
Dude, just last episode, I said I wanted to have some freaking guests on, or this wasn't last, it was a couple episodes ago. Regardless, I wanted to say I wanted to have a few guests on, and I think we've got our first one.
There you go. Other than Josh, check out that episode.
Oh yeah, Josh, scary, very scary story. Go listen, very exciting.
And then watch the follow-up episode where we argue about indirectly related things to that. The text argument episode.
Oh, that was the episode right after?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it was. I think it was right after, or if it wasn't. The text argument was because of the comments right before the Josh episode, if you recall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It might have been. I think it was a few episodes after that, though.
Well, either way, I'm just trying to farm engagement, so it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah. Go watch them both, just for
There you
context.
go.
On
There
both.
you go. That was my only point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, hey, I wasn't gonna bring this up, but since you were talking about batshit crazy old ladies, I guess it's. I would like to take a turn at the podium here. So, I also have a job.
What?
That's crazy. And I met an interesting old lady at my occupation, just not maybe a couple days ago. And she comes in, and she's looking for a mattress, right? And I'm getting the impression that she's not going to drop a lot of money. Totally fine. I'm not the kind of salesman that's going to really be bothered too much by that. Get what you can afford. I walk her all the way down the pricing ladder, all the way down to the cheapest thing you can possibly get. And it's just like this basically little sliver of memory foam is all it is. It's nothing. And this little like metal platform to put it on. And she's just, and I say, look at this. This is the end of the line. We've arrived at it,
You've hit rock bottom, literally speaking.
And she says this again. And I don't know if this was just maybe a rough financial situation, whatever. I don't make any judgments like that. It was the reaction that was funny. We get to this and I say, this is the price. This is what it is. And I tell her, it's like, it's not great, but it'll get the job done, I suppose. And she says, I've found it. This is what I've been looking for. And I said,
what?
Well, I'm happy I could have, been the vessel to help you in this journey. And she's just like, well, she's just like, I've been looking all day and I found exactly what I'm looking for. This is great. And I'm like, alrighty then, let's take you up here. We'll process this payment and we'll go get it. Yeah, this is great. So
how much money was this slab of memory foam?
Like $100. It was $100, and then the base was like 150 maybe. Is what it was.
Literally the least amount of money you could possibly spend.
Yeah. So then we get up to the counter, and I'm helping her out, getting payment ready, and she's talking to herself now. She's not talking to me anymore. She's talking to herself. She's kind of pacing in a circle, right? Saying to herself, this is great. This is a wonderful day. I'm so happy I came here today. I've found what I'm looking for.
Dude, that place about to get shot up.
and I don't know, like,
I would be afraid.
Like, and I kept just I said to her, I was just like, like, what would I say? I think I just was like agreeing. I was just like, yeah, it's great. That'll work out for you. I'm glad you're happy. That's great. And she just kept doing it. Ended up processing the payment, everything. We scheduled all the things we needed to schedule, and that's fine. And then I say to her, you have a wonderful evening. That's great. Sayonara, right? And then she turns to my coworker, who has an earbud in, and she says, "Are you listening to music?" And he said, "Yes."
Wow.
And she says, "I want to tell you about the greatest singer of all time."
Oh man, who can this be?
Here's the sad part of this. I don't remember.
I'm
so disappointed. I don't remember. But she and I've walked away at this point because I can't handle this awkward situation. I literally deuced out. But I was still listening from like around the corner, and she's just like cornering this guy, telling him about this. All I remember was it was somebody international. I don't know from where. It was not somebody from here, from the United States. And she was going on about like he has 1 million listeners, which
so not very many.
So
in
not
the
very
world
many.
Of music.
Yeah, and he says, "That's great," and she said, "Yeah, bye now," and left. That was my story.
I would be afraid for my life. She's gonna have like an episode.
Dude, it's people like that like, just start doing weird things and they kind of corner you socially. You ever been in those situations?
of course, I think everyone has.
Yeah.
Where you just there are those type of people, and I don't know. It's hard to say if it's something like wrong, or if it's just they just grew up weird. They have a weird personality. It's kind of hard to say. Talking to yourself, I think it might lean towards there's probably something maybe not fully right.
Yeah.
But they're still perfectly functioning members of society, so like yeah, I don't know.
I was just glad she was happy.
Yeah, well, she let you know, or
Yeah.
she let whoever she was talking to know.
Be as crazy as you
they
want,
know.
as long as you're happy.
I was listening to Jordan Peterson the other day, and I really want to get your input on this. So something that he said. I had to re-listen to this probably 4 or 5 times and then think about it for another 15, 20 minutes to really figure out what the heck he's trying to say here. And he just blurted it out on a whim like nothing.
He does that
you get
sometimes.
for being 100. Yeah, that's what you get for being 150 IQ and when we're 111 and 108.
Yeah.
So he said this. It was in the context of a postmodernism discussion, which I barely even know anything about postmodernism, but he said there is no perception without action. And that one I had to think about for a while. If there is no, and then there's no action without goal-oriented motivation. Therefore, there is no perception that isn't associated to motivation.
What was that? What was that very first part?
There is no perception without action. That one, I'm not kidding you. I thought about this for 15 minutes. And what I think he means by this is you can't perceive something without it having an influence on your actions. If you perceive something to be like, you can obviously perceive something and not immediately act. But what I think he's trying to say is what you can't do is perceive something, recognize it, understand it without it having an influence on your actions in life. If you perceive when you walk into the road and get run over and die, that's going to influence your actions to not do that.
Okay.
But on a much grander scale.
I think that's fair.
So, in addition to that, there is no action without goal-oriented motivation. That one I found a little bit easier to kind of get, I think. If you're performing an action, obviously you're not doing an action without a goal. There is no meaningless action.
No perception without action. I'm trying to follow just the words, first of all.
Dude, this is why I listened to this probably 4 or 5 times and thought about it for 20 minutes.
Okay, let's just
thought about it.
You already kind of did it, but let's go through it again. So, first part, no perception without action.
There is no perception without action. So perception is taking in information via one of our senses. Sight, smell, touch, whatever. Perception. You can't have perception without action.
What are we defining as an action?
I think anything. I think if you perceive...
So I'm walking...
literally any...
So I'm walking down the street, right? I'm walking down the street, and I smell a hot dog stand.
Yeah.
I have now perceived that these are hot dogs I'm smelling.
Right.
I decide to not get hot dogs. Have I still done an action?
Maybe.
Because if I get hot dogs because I smelled them, that's obviously an action.
Obviously. But not necessarily, but what it might do is influence. If it smells good enough, it might cause you to get hot dogs sometime in the future when you otherwise might not have, which is an action that was caused by that perception.
Fair.
Or vice versa. If they smell bad, they might have caused you to stay away from a hot dog longer than you might otherwise have, which is abstinence of an action based on a perception.
Right.
Which in itself could mean inaction because you're replacing one action with another, so to speak.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I think that is what he means by there is no perception without action, because perception is in essence what we have built ourselves off of. Our actions are based on a life of perceptions and learning things, right?
Right.
And our actions are based. It's a little bit kind of like how our previous conversation of free will was. Our actions are based on previous perceptions.
Right.
To a degree.
So
I think I am on board with what he's saying there. If like I said, he just murmured this entire thing and moved on to his next point.
Yeah, I've seen like shorts with him in it, and there's a lot to unpack with in a 20-second time frame. Yeah,
he's like 150 something IQ. Like he can process more than we can, a lot faster than we can.
So okay, so let's just write that off as a given. All right, there's no perception.
There is no perception without action.
What's that next bit?
Then there is no action without goal-oriented motivation.
So if we're talking about goal-oriented motivation, we're talking about setting goals for yourself, or motivation that results in a goal that you would like to achieve. I assume whether consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah, I am maybe of the belief that there is no action without motivation in general, not just goal oriented.
Right.
Maybe that's one and the same, but I don't believe you can have an action without that action for a purpose, which would be a goal, and you need to be motivated. Motivation is the actuator of you doing it. So this one kind of makes sense to me. Does
that not counter your, or I guess somebody else, whoever said it first, I forget, the argument of predetermined actions, the absence of free will, because all of it wouldn't be a matter of motivation. It would be a matter of your biology or your genetics.
You can be motivated by things because of your biology and genetics.
Sure, but the idea is, I guess maybe that's just the way I'm interpreting the idea of motivation. Motivation is something you desire, and this is not as a. I mean, I understand the argument that the presented argument of no free will doesn't eliminate wants, but I don't know. It feels counter to me. I don't know. The idea of
to me, it feels perfectly fine. The wants are generated by your biology and perceptions of the past, and your actions are actuated by the motivation for those wants. If it's high enough, that seems. There's nothing unbiological about that.
So this what Jordan Peterson is saying is essentially, it's a separate idea, but it's similar in that Now we're adding in perception leading to action into the mix. Now it's not just your genetics in your past, but also, well, I guess it could be your past, but also just perception in
perception
general.
of your past. Yeah.
Perception
Learning.
in general resulting
Right.
in action, which is furthermore not something free will oriented, more
Baked in.
more baked in things. I don't disagree with that. I think that
now we're just to the if A equals B and B equals C, does A equals C? So therefore, does perception, is there no perception without motivation? Is there no perception that isn't associated with motivation? This one, I haven't connected the dots. Obviously, we just connected the dots in a longer string.
Mm.
But does A equal C here? This is, I don't know. I was thinking about this for quite a long time, and I haven't really made any ground on this. Is there no perception that isn't associated with motivation?
I cannot personally, at least now, think of an instance where I can be motivated, not prompted by a previous understanding being brought forth by perception, if that makes sense. Because how do you care enough to be motivated by something you have not fully perceptualized, perceptionated?
I guess that's true.
I think it might be true. I think that you need to, in order to make a reasonable argument to change your goals or to alter your goals or to make goals, you would first have to have perceived the outcome prior or perceived the steps leading up to it. Well, let's take it one step further, or maybe backwards. I don't know how you would look at this. How can you be motivated for an outcome if you don't understand the process? Right? If you don't understand the process or even the destination, why would you be motivated for a destination you don't understand? Therefore, predating that would have to be perception.
Motivated for a destination you don't understand. I mean, is that not just what science is?
But what science is intake of information and making perceptions off of it. Or, theory and proof. You have, but the first step of making this is the scientific process, because I'm smart and I know these things. No, I'm stupid. But if what I remember from middle school science class, when we talked about the general scientific process in the formal form, it starts with a hypothesis.
Yeah, hypothesizing
and
theory.
And what is a hypothesis but a perception, or a guess based on the perceptions you have, or what things you've already perceptualized. It's a better word.
So a guess, it's a hypothesis based on perceptions.
Yeah. So it doesn't exclude science,
which generates motivation.
Right. It doesn't exclude science, because science starts with perception and ends with
So even
results.
though the end goal isn't there, because it's not understood,
because
the perceptions are.
I mentioned the end goal earlier, and I think that whatever context I said that in might have been okay to use that in, but I think it's not, at least in this context, particularly helpful, because what we're talking about, I think motivated for an outcome is definitely a real thing, but we're not talking about motivation in regard to an outcome. We're talking about motivation in general, I think.
Motivation to prime actions.
Yeah.
Just actions in general.
I think motivation is inherently goal-oriented, which is the other part of that prompt that we talked about. But I don't think it's necessary for motivation. But also, does that counter? Does that go against counter? Does that counter my dick whenever it goes against everything I just said? Listen,
say that again.
I don't know, dude. I'm so tired right now.
Yeah,
I want to take a brief intermission just to let you know why I'm tired. I stayed up very late playing Black Ops 6.
God, Season 1 came out today.
So I stayed up late playing Black Ops 6, and then I got up early and played Black Ops 6. So I can barely string a sentence together. So what I was trying to get at there was the claim I just made was that motivation is not necessarily tied to a goal. But I actually think I want to retract that. I think that motivation is very much goal-oriented, which is what Jordan Peterson was saying. In general, it's
goal-oriented motivation.
Yeah. I think that you can't have motivation without thinking of your end goal. Because what can you be motivated against to do, right? You have motivation to complete a task. And the argument at hand is, do you need to perceive essentially the hypothesis in this situation? You need to have a theory or a base understanding in order to set goals to be motivated to reach an outcome. Which is a long-winded way of saying that I agree with what he's saying.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I guess I'm on board with there is no perception that isn't associated with motivation. But were we looking at that backwards? Were we looking at motivation and making sure perception is always accompanied with it, instead of looking at perception and making sure motivation is always accompanied with it?
Well, that's what I said first. So that was the example of the hot dog.
Okay, that was the hot dog.
That was the hot dog. That was the...
Well, that was not the hot dog example. The hot dog example was there is no perception without action.
Okay, I guess you're right. What was the conclusion we came to? The conclusion we came to with that was that even though you perceive, or if you perceive, it almost certainly will influence an action, even if it's not
maybe not immediate. Yeah. So if perception always leads to action, and action always is because of goal-oriented motivation, perception is always associated with motivation. But can you perceive something without motivation coming into play? I think we both agree A does equal B and B does equal C. But I'm really finding it hard for A to equal C here. And I don't know how that makes any sense, because it equals B and B equals C. Is there perception?
Let me tell you this. Let me say this right here. You tell me an idea, and let's say I disagree with that idea. I have now perceived that idea. I have intooked and perceived. But I disagree with you. So I disregard.
But perception... Is perception thought? I thought perception was the intake. Okay, yeah, I guess. Perception is the intake of information through a sense. A sight, hearing, touch, smell. That's perception.
Okay, so we're not
cognition isn't necessarily perception.
Okay.
But you are hearing.
So I guess I think maybe
you're hearing me speak it.
I think the mental process of that is maybe the next step after perception.
Yeah.
So
once it is received through a sense, then the cognition of that sense begins. But the perception part is the sense of it.
Okay.
I think is what perception.
So now I need to think.
I think that's what perception is.
So now I need to think of a new example then. For A to equal C.
Right. Or I think we're trying to find an example where A won't equal C, because Jordan Peterson is of the mind that A always equals C, and it's just taking a while for me to wrap my brain around.
Well, so just break it down. So basically, what you're saying. So what is perception? Right? Perception is intake through senses.
Intake of information through a sense. Yeah.
If you see something, let's just be generic. You see something. Does that equal some sort of motivation for you? It depends on what it is, but I think it's very difficult to just apply a blanket yes to you see something and therefore motivation.
It's really hard to connect those two dots. It's really hard. So let's break it down even further.
It's pretty already broken down.
And it's still hard for us to comprehend. So I think we need to go down.
We need to go deeper.
You perceive the scent. So you smell a hot dog. That scent's been perceived.
Yeah.
We understand that leads always to action. Eventually.
Some sort of action. Positive or negative.
So whatever that action might have been, it was motivated by that earlier perception. So if you smell the hot dog, it smells, we'll say it's a good hot dog. We'll say it smells good. You smell the hot dog, it smells great. Now, what that action caused, what the action is next week, you then buy a pack of hot dogs when you might otherwise not have. So that perception led to that action.
Right.
That action, the goal-oriented motivation that came with that action was hot dog good. Eat food.
Hot dog good, eat food.
Yeah.
Tell me. Yeah.
That seems those are pretty goal-oriented motivations there. So, hot dog good, eat food was because you perceived a good smell a week ago. So, I would say in that example, that perception is in fact linked to that goal-oriented motivation. I would say in that example, A equals C.
I think that it helps to boil this down even further.
Before long, we're gonna get to the quantum level of this question here.
I think here's where I think the issue is and why we're having trouble with this. I think we're trying to look at this too maximally. We're trying to find big examples, but it could be something very simple. It could be, I think smell hot dog good is pretty basic as well, but it's like C keyboard on my desk, or C keyboard somewhere, not on my desk. And a keyboard look good. Keyboard want buy. Keyboard buy.
So that was perception that led to action.
I think that does happen. I think that happens.
And that action was based on a goal-oriented motivation of wanting keyboard.
Yeah.
So that perception of keyboard look good was linked to the motivation of I want good-looking keyboard, so I purchased.
Yeah. Or to use another sense, go to store, touch keyboard feel bad, no buy keyboard.
Right. And the
Which is-
perception of bad feeling
Yeah.
led to the action of walking past the checkout counter
Yeah.
with no keyboard.
What it's difficult to say is that you're saying the action of not taking action, but it's hard to attribute that to now motivation. How are you motivated? It's difficult to say that you are motivated to not take action. That's an odd way to put it.
Not taking action in itself is a different action, though, isn't it?
What do you mean a different action? Like a separate action?
Yeah. Not the conscious decision to not take action is an action.
Right.
You're still doing a thing. You're just not doing a different thing.
Right.
And there was motivation to do the not different thing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So So what we're talking about is a small scale motivation. This is not a subconscious motivation even. That's what we're talking about. Because I think it could be probably conscious or subconscious, but if it, let's say it's just like the idea of sight, I scan the room, I don't like the way something looks, or I something, I don't know, I touch something and it's not, I don't like it. I might not think to myself, I'm going to make sure I don't buy this.
I think this entire process can be entirely subconscious.
Right. I think that's where it's not that it's hard, but it's where I don't necessarily want to attribute motivation, because I'm thinking of motivation as something that's processed through the brain.
Conscious thought.
Right. Consciously processed, and I declare to myself an outcome that I would like to see.
Yeah, but I think that's motivation I think can be way more under the rug than that.
Right. So I think what makes Mr. Peterson's words true is if we say you perceive something, that thing influences some sort of action in the future, whether it be positive or negative, and because you go whichever way you go in the future, because it's bound to happen based on your experience, you are then in a way motivated to make the action you've made. And that, I would say that is universally true.
Okay. So yeah. I think so. Yeah, I think what he said is right. I think I'm finding it easier, and I'm finding it more simple to think of more examples where A equals C here.
Yeah.
I think I'm finding it easier.
See,
to
look at
connect
me.
the dots.
Look at me. I am the one that brings the knowledge. I don't feel that way.
Now that wasn't easy. That was I thought about this for a long time. That was not an easy conclusion to come to. Man,
Yeah.
I imagine if one of us was smart.
I could never imagine.
Can you imagine one of us just saying something with so many layers just in a sentence?
I sometimes think I'm very profound, and then the thing that I think I'm going to say profoundly comes out of my mouth, and then I'm like, damn, that was stupid.
Yeah.
That happens to me sometimes. I'm like, I'm cooking with this one. And then I'm in a group and I'm just like, boom, knowledge. And everybody's just like, yeah, obviously. The fuck? And I'm like, damn. Man, thought I was on to something.
It's so just and as Dawkins actually personally said this to Peterson, and I am also kind of of this belief. Dawkins believes that Peterson is drunk on symbols, and like I said, I would agree with that. Peterson, I oftentimes say that Jordan Peterson is a master of not getting to the point.
Right.
Is how I kind of describe him. And that does not mean he doesn't have profoundly like interesting and useful things to say, because obviously he does. He's a super smart guy. Both of them are. But like, what we just took 30 minutes to unpack is how he speaks day to day. So like it's really hard to genuinely follow along with some of the points he's going through.
I feel like he would be, and I know he is an educator, but I feel like that would be tough as a student.
I agree. He has his own like university type of deal, Peterson Academy, and I say that he's not actually the one doing the lectures in that. He has others do lectures, but
he's a busy man.
Yeah, I know he was. I don't think he is anymore, but he at least was a lecturer. I do agree. I think it would be. He's hard to follow. He has a podcast that I have listened to some episodes on, and yeah, that's kind of where I established my idea of he's a master and of not getting to the point.
I think that there's a lot of people that maybe not necessarily in education space, but a lot of people that end up in some sort of either education or learning based, teaching based occupations or hobbies. And they like to spit information, and it's very difficult to follow. And I think that an underrated skill of an educator is to teach,
the ability to teach.
Well, kind of specifically to teach at the level of your audience. I think
I 100% agree.
I think it's an underrated skill, and I think that people admire somebody who can spit lingo and is clearly just a master of their art, but you get lost in. I had an experience with that once. It's not a profound experience, so I won't spend much time on it. But when I was in college, I had a science course that was taught by a neurosurgeon. Taught by a neurosurgeon. You want to know the one and only thing I remember from that class. The one and only thing.
What?
I remember that he wears a helmet when he rides his bicycle. Because he was explaining something. He was explaining something, and he drew a picture of himself on the bicycle, and it was something about going down a hill, and maybe it was like I think maybe he's talking about momentum or something like that, or like objects in motion, whatever it was. But he drew a picture of himself on his bike going down a hill, and he had a helmet on. He said, "I wear a helmet because I'm a neurosurgeon, and I know the brain is important." And that's the only thing I remember from that class.
Well, here's the problem. Here's why that's so difficult. Teaching at the level of your audience is because usually your audience is not at the same level or speed.
That's true.
Some are going to learn way faster than others. So like another person in your class about this neurosurgeon, for all we know, you could just go up to them and say like, "Hey, what did you think about that?" And they'd be able to recall things and actually learn a lot. And then you'd be like, "Oh, well, I learned nothing and can't remember anything."
Yeah, no, I'm
because they're faster learners or something.
I'm very confident that I'm just dumb. But my point being, I think everybody kind of came to that conclusion though, because I actually had a lot of friends in that class. And we would talk amongst ourselves afterwards, and it was just like, hey, this guy's kind of hard to follow. I'm frantically taking notes, but it seems like he moves too fast, in a lot of ways. But yeah, no, I have no points to make about that, about education and that skill in education, because I'm not an educator. I just in general think that I hear that a lot from people who are frustrated with their education. It's just like I feel like I can't keep up. This person is teaching above me.
Yeah. Yeah. And where I heard that quote from Peterson was actually one of his podcast episodes. And on his own podcast, it's his own. He has no obligation to speak in a teachable or slow whatever. He can do whatever he wants. He can talk about whatever he wants. It's his own podcast.
Right.
So like I don't know if his lectures are the same way as podcasts that he does. I have to believe that they're not, because he's, I mean, one step removed of a celebrity.
Right.
And a lot of people have learned a lot from him. So like I tend to be on the side of his lectures. Probably there was a lot to learn from all walks of life. And I believe that to be true still. Just you got to really slow him down.
You gotta watch the video on half speed. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And then pause it and re-listen a few times.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a recently, this was one of the most interesting debates I have heard in a very long time. Recently, two of my like favorite people in terms of intellectual knowledge right now, Jordan Peterson and Richard Dawkins, had a debate like a week ago.
Dang.
And
that'd be interesting. Because isn't Jordan Peterson, isn't he am I wrong in saying he's religious?
He is.
Okay.
He is not a traditional or creationist. He doesn't, from what I understand, he doesn't literally believe in the virgin birth, the resurrection of God, basically the things that can't actually biologically happen.
Yeah.
So, but what he does believe is the stories that the Bible teaches us. And this is a lot of where Dawkins gets his notion of he's drunk on symbols, is because a lot of his references are biblical stories. Like he references Cain constantly, like actually constantly, from the Cain and Abel. And this is another reason he believes is because humans are just kind of different from other animals. Yeah, biologically, obviously, we're just further along in the evolutionary process. He gets that too.
Right.
But what doesn't really make sense is if tiger see bear run away, if chicken see cat run away, if prey see predator run away.
Right.
Basically. But what doesn't really make sense in the evolutionary process with us is with humans, if prey see predator, go at predator, and you're likely going to come out better on the other side.
Okay.
That basically the obstacle is the way type of deal with us. We grow with adversity. Voluntary suffering is, in essence, where we become better. And that kind of just, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And that's honestly a good argument for some sort of divinity.
You mean
like,
it doesn't?
Why
it doesn't make sense evolutionarily, is what you're saying?
Right? Yeah. It does. Yeah.
Okay.
I
thought you were like just disagreeing with that point, but you're saying it doesn't make sense as an evolutionary advantage.
Right.
Gotcha.
So, and that's pretty documented in the Bible a number of times where adversity is the way. Like that's a common thing.
Right.
So Peterson finds it, he doesn't see a world in which the Bible wasn't written with some sort of divine intervention. He doesn't, there's no way that the Bible written so long ago, granted across tons and tons and tons of cultures, across many thousands of translations, and lots of people with different narratives and prerogatives and propaganda that they might want to put in the Bible. All that aside, Peterson still believes that the Bible had to have been to be so profound in its storytelling, to match and mimic that of human life today. It just couldn't have been done without divine intervention, something like that. So he doesn't really have a very standard belief of he's not a standard Christian. He's just simply not. But
Right.
his reason for believing is, in my opinion, the most convincing. I'm not, because like I said, I'm more of like a Dawkins type. What I see is what there is, kind of deal. Broken down, and I'm not convinced. But the idea that humans are so kind of in that way, just really weirdly different, it's weird. That is not normal. So
Yeah.
it was a very interesting debate between Dawkins and Peterson. If nobody's listened to that, and especially you, I would highly, highly recommend it. I've listened to it like 3 times now, mainly to re-listen to Peterson's arguments for the same reason that we just took 20 minutes to go through one quote, because you really have to think about what he's saying to follow his argument. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting argument.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested, especially I'm interested in the idea of him believing humans being counter to the standard experience of life, being a reason to believe in a deity. It's an interesting argument. I feel
Right.
that it could be.
I would say I would go as far to say it's not even unreasonable. In fact, it's very reasonable.
Yeah, no, I don't find it to be unreasonable. Definitely, I think that there is probably a way to explain it. Not something we have properly currently, but something that could be discovered. I don't know if it's just a evolutionary path.
Then that's my belief too. I believe there is some reason that we probably just don't know yet as to why humans are, for some reason, weirdly flipped in that predator prey type of way.
This is almost certainly not a reason, and it's not necessarily relevant, but it's an interesting theory that I heard somebody talk about for why humans were able to rise to prominence, or at the very least not just be killed, because there are so many predators to us in the wild, and the reason is because humans got very good at developing tools.
Well, one of the things I've heard is in the evolutionary process, whatever being is most powerful is not going to be the being that is going to have the most likelihood of surviving. It is whatever being is the quickest adaptable to its environment is the being that's going to have the highest probability of survival.
Right.
And that describes us.
I think that's fair. And I think that honestly, the two arguments, the thing I just said and the thing you just said, kind of, I think, going hand in hand. We use our knowledge and our creativity to adapt our environment, or to adapt us to for us to adapt to our environment, or to adapt the environment to us. And that creates safety.
Yeah. So I would say that's because we were the lucky ones that learned how to adapt faster than any other mammal or being we came out on top.
Yeah.
And just like eventually, somewhere in the Neanderthal area, we got consciousness. Somehow our brains developed the ability to consciousness is just now a product of the human brain, and we don't know what part of the brain creates it or where it comes from. And there's this theory that relates this to actual time as well. There's this theory from Brian Cox. He talks about how our brain, like basically how I just described, we don't know where consciousness is in the brain. We just know that our brain has something to do with consciousness. The way that atoms are built up in a certain way, it produces consciousness somehow. And he has this theory of, in some way, he was questioning time. What is time? Maybe because we don't know what time is. We don't know what creates it. But it is possible that in the same way consciousness is just somehow developed by the brain, somehow the universe produces time. Somehow in some way, time is just a byproduct of the universe existing. And the universe, and we apply, because we live and die. We have a start and end. Planets, molecules, all these things have a start and end. And it would be kind of silly of us to apply that to the universe. The universe and time may not have had a beginning, for all we know.
Sure.
So I just thought that was interesting. Because the universe we know the universe can manipulate time.
True. Yeah.
The theory of general relativity is time and space are intrinsically linked. A black hole, if you are close to the damn thing, time will not be the same. In fact, it will stop. If you are next to a black hole, it will stop. So time is obviously controlled by the elements of the universe. So
if you ask me, time isn't real.
Is it just a construct of us?
Time was invented by clockmakers to sell clocks.
Oh, dude. He must not have thought of that, because
that is my no, I'm kidding.
Time was invented, yeah. Yeah,
I don't know.
Time?
This is we're getting
dude,
into...
this is Brian Cox is a super genius in terms of astrophysiological stuff.
Yeah.
And this was wild speculation for him. So
this what I was about to get at is we're getting to the point where I think you and I both are not only interested enough, but given enough time, we could know enough to have a meaningful conversation about it, in the sense that, like, theories and things like that, learning and gathering information. Having not read the things you've read, it just seems a little far-fetched. But this
is just too far beyond us.
It straight up is. If it's difficult for top minds, then it's definitely difficult for the bottom minds, which is us.
Yeah, we are the bottom minds. But although even for a top mind, hard to understand, and just a theory at that, a hypothesis even at that, not even a theory, I thought it was very interesting to kind of think of time in that way, just because it is so malleable,
right,
by space and light, and how black holes can just throw time out of whack. So maybe time is And in the same way that our brains can throw consciousness out of whack. You know, you get hit in the head with a baseball bat. There's no guarantee that you're going to come back a fully conscious. And like brain damage causes damage to your consciousness. That people sometimes are born that way. Sometimes it's accidents. It damages it. So in the same way, mass has an influence on time and light. Who's to say that the universe is somehow not producing time in a way that the brain produces consciousness, where we can't really find it and we don't know really
Right.
what is producing it? And I think that's just profoundly interesting, just deeply interesting, and a curiosity that I likely will never get to the bottom of in our lifetime, unfortunately.
I think that it's likely that we just don't understand, for a lot of reasons. And I think one of the reasons is that humans are so good at putting ourselves at the forefront of science, or our understanding of science. So, I mean, we have our sun, we revolve around our sun, 24-hour clock, things of that nature. And that's how we personally here on Earth measure time. And I think that kind of just becomes how we feel is this standard idea of time. It's linear, it's ongoing, unchanging.
Right.
And to suggest that it's even remotely likely that that is not how time ought to be measured, or the best way time to be measured on a cosmic scale, seems very counterintuitive because of our tendency to put ourselves at the forefront of our thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing Brian Cox said that was just put into perspective the mass of a black hole, which was just so fascinating. So our sun, the mass of our sun, it fits 1 million Earths inside of it. Big sort of deal. If the sun was condensed into the space of 3 kilometers, that is the density needed to start a black hole.
Jesus Christ.
If our sun was condensed, the whole mass of the sun was condensed into an object the size just 3 kilometers long, that is the start of a black hole. That is, like, when you say things like that, like, what does that even mean? It's hard to, like, even comprehend. It's hard to think about something like that.
It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine matter pressing in that way.
Right. It's just it's hard for our bottom level brains and even the top level brains to just conceptualize. Like, you're just saying words at that point. Like, what does that even mean? He also said this, if you pass the event horizon of a black hole, which is the point of you're not coming back.
Yeah.
It's the way time is affected in it is like trying to run away from the event horizon once you're past it. It's like trying to run away from tomorrow happening.
Right.
Like what? Like, it's sorry, but it's just not going to happen.
Right.
That's how impossible it is to return from an event horizon.
That's interesting. That's interesting and uncomprehendable to me.
Yeah. There's been a lot of brain cycles this episode.
Let me let's take the brain cycles off for a minute, and I want to talk about one story that I've heard recently. I was going to bring it up at the start, but we got into a fascinating and a difficult discussion about science for a while, so that's fine. But I did want to mention this because it's an interesting thing that's happened recently. So Marques Brownlee,
good old Marques
Brownlee, recently was in a lot of hot water for his wallpaper app. You recall? Mm-hmm. We talked about it here on the podcast. Check out that episode. Yeah. I don't remember which one it was.
Go watch all of them to figure out which one it was.
Yeah, we won't link it. No. New controversy with Marques Brownlee.
Really? Something new now?
Yeah, as of like a day or two ago.
Real quick, panels, before everybody hates, panels is good now.
Yeah, panel's good.
I actually have it on my phone. It's like good now.
Yeah,
So
I believe I have it on my phone as well. I haven't like used it yet, like picked a wallpaper out yet or anything, but
I've gotten a couple wallpapers from it. It's pretty good. It's good.
You know,
I like it.
Good guy.
So what's this new hot water he's in?
So yeah, good guy made a good wallpaper app. So now he did a thing. He released a basically a 10-minute ad. It was like a sponsored video that was just straight up an ad. So that was already something that people didn't like.
What?
I think it was a car. I don't remember.
Okay.
But so that's not why people were mad at him. They were also mad about that. In the video, he is shown driving the car. And in the video, you could see his speedometer.
Yeah.
And he was caught on the video he posted going 96 in a 35. 96 and a 35 with like children crossing. I think this might have been a school zone even. Like, or at the very least, it's like a known children cross the street here area. Yeah.
How do they know it was a 35?
Because there was a speed limit. There was a speed limit sign that he passed. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Dude.
Isn't that insane?
That's insane. Is that real?
Yeah, no, he posted it. He's since then he has snipped out that part of the video and like publicly apologized, saying that he was an idiot. But like people are not having it. People are not having it with the Marques right now.
Dude, that's so dumb.
Yeah, and that's what he said.
So dumb.
That's what he said. He said it was inexcusable and dumb. Well, actually, originally he got in a lot of trouble because he just used the YouTube tool to just snip it out of the video, and then he put like a little comment, just said, "Edit out the unnecessary driving bit." Is what he said. And then everybody was like, "Whoa!" And then he said, in the apology, and he said in the apology, I think first he blurred it. He blurred the speedometer. But so in this particular car, there's your speedometer in front of you, and then there's a passenger speedometer. There's like your speedometer, but in front of the passenger seat. Yeah, I don't know why that is, but like that one was still visible. So people said that, and then he cut it out altogether, and people were like, "Now you're just covering up." And then he issued an apology saying, "I'm not covering this up," but he did.
When in fact he definitely was. Wow, dude, that's mind blowing. You know, I like Marques Brownlee.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, that's so dumb.
Yeah, I still like Marques Brownlee. I'm very curious to know, like, I want to see like either a video or at least him bringing up on the podcast. I want to know how he responds to this. I know how he initially responded to it, which he basically just said that was dumb and inexcusable, and I'm not going to do that ever again. You know, which fair. That's what anybody I think would say.
I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't respond again in the podcast or something. I would be surprised if that's not the end of it.
I also wouldn't be surprised. I hope he handles it like he handled panels. That's my hope. Which he like.
But the thing is with panels, he fixed the problems.
Yeah, how do you fix?
And they're not problems anymore.
How do you fix?
You're not going to go back and undrive 96 into 35.
I mean, he could try. He could drive the same road at at no miles an hour.
At 0 miles, at 1 mile an hour, but like 3 times to compensate. Yeah. I mean, I would rather be in hot water with panels than something like that.
Yeah,
honestly,
that's potentially like there's no video evidence of you doing a bad, like a very bad.
There's video evidence of you committing a felony.
Yeah, reckless. Yeah, we're talking about reckless speeding at this point, is
if things were to go less fortunate, manslaughter.
Yeah,
that's so bad.
Yeah, that was my Marques Brownlee update. We're gonna have to make this a segment, Marques Brownlee controversy updates, because for so long he's been one of the most uncontroversial figures on the platform,
and now back to back.
Now back to back, he's just getting slammed for doing, well, admittedly, it's dumb things on his own part, but just getting slammed by the internet and like, I don't know. I'm interested to see where this goes. Like, I think you might be right. Probably is going to go nowhere, and he's just
I
never
think
going to do that again.
Yeah, I think he's not going to apologize or as further than he already has, and I think he's just going to let it blow over.
Yeah.
Honestly, most drama does.
Yeah.
It just blows over. So, like, I think he's just going to let it happen. But where did he apologize? Was it a tweet? What did he do?
I believe it was a tweet. He said that first little unnecessary driving bit. That was just a comment on YouTube, on the YouTube video. And then he apologized on Twitter. X.
It's fascinating to me how people think that they can get away with cover-ups on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, shouldn't you just, like, swallow the freaking frog from moment one instead of make things worse? Like, there's this whole controversy with Brian Johnson, the Liver King. He's a
right.
He was a bodybuilder and like this influencer guy that advocates for like eating like raw bear nuts or something and stuff like that. And for years, he doubled down on being natural, like constantly. And then eventually he was exposed. And he faced a lot of well-deserved backlash for being an obvious charlatan.
Right.
And I believe what had happened was he said, "All right, I'm coming off." And then just didn't.
Yeah.
So he was just like further digging his own hole, saying like, people need to understand, and I would think something like Marques would get this. You can't do cover-ups on the internet. It just doesn't work.
Right. I think he even said something about he's aware of the Streisand effect. I need to
Streisand effect. What is that?
I need to refamiliarize myself with this. The Streisand effect is. Let me tell you about it. No, I'm not going to donate to Wikipedia. So it's an unintended consequence of attempts to hide, remove, or censor information, where the effort instead increases public awareness of the information.
Which is like most of the time on the internet.
Right. Yeah. So what had happened was he tried to cover it up, as he claimed he didn't do. And then everybody was like, whoa.
Blew it up
hey,
even
now.
more.
Hey, now. And then it started getting shared and tweeted and things. And then he said, he and everybody was like, dude, have you not heard of the Streisand effect? You tried to cover it up and now everybody knows about it. And then he said that. He was like, and yes, I'm well aware of the Streisand effect. And that's what's happening here. Apparently. Even though he still...
I was not aware of the... I was aware of the Streisand effect. I just didn't know it had a name.
Yeah. I assume it's in relation to Barbara Streisand, if I had to guess.
Was that like some murder or something?
No, it's a
long time ago.
I'm pretty sure it's an actress.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Barbara... Yeah, what was she?
Like murder in the 1800s that she tried to cover up and expose herself because of it or something like that.
What did Barbara Streisand do? She's a singer and an actress. She was in Meet the Fockers.
Okay.
Never seen that. I just saw the name of it. Meet the Fockers.
Meet the Fockers. Okay.
and amongst other things. But what did she do?
Yeah, there's got to be some controversy for her to earn such a name.
Right.
As a title. There's the real quick callback to astrophysics. Why am I blanking on his name? Dude. What's the guy in the wheelchair that had a voice box to be able to speak?
Stephen Hawking?
Hawking.
Oh, I was like, that's the obvious answer, but what are you thinking about?
Yeah, that's the obvious answer. Why do you think I was feeling so dumb? Of course. there's radiation that's emitted from black holes, and it emits a heat. It has a temperature, and on the headstone of Stephen Hawking's grave, he has etched in the stone the equation of the temperature of the edge of a black hole.
Mm-hmm.
And it was then named Hawking radiation. So that's kind of like what I'm thinking of with this whole Streisand. When you do something, discover something, it sometimes gets named after you.
So the Streisand effect, apparently it was in 2003, she sued a photographer, attempted to sue a photographer for $50 million for posting an aerial photo of her mansion. The lawsuit was dismissed, but because of the lawsuit, people then saw her mansion more. People like flocked online to see this and created even bigger of an issue than, because I'm sure she was just wanting to have her privacy respected or something like that. Whatever. I don't know I don't know the reason, but of course this led in turn to an even more lack of privacy and the exact opposite of what she wanted.
Which in that scenario, I wouldn't even call her the bad guy. But
right. Yeah, I don't know the full story, but at face value, at the very least, that seems not that bad. Well, maybe we can change the name to the Marques Brownlee.
The Marques Brownlee effect, yeah.
Even though this is going to be a non-issue in like a month.
Yeah, probably. It's going to... Dude, I mean, shoot. The pace at which, like, news is coming and going is... Maybe, I hope this is changing due to it being post-election, but at least pre-election, dude. Holy cow. We went from, like, Hawk to a girl to Trump got shot to, what else after that? Trump got almost assassinated a second time. It's like, these are things that, specifically the Trump getting shot, things that, like, are country altering,
right?
Not so much the Hawk Tour girl, but
I mean,
the fact that they just
altering.
Yeah, but the fact that these things blow up in popularity and then literally like 3 days later are forgotten.
Yeah,
the pace at which stuff is coming and going is just mind-blowing lately. Like I said, I honestly hope that that's an election thing, just a side effect of news.
Yeah.
And now that we're a couple days free of that, it kind of slows down a bit. But
well,
I don't know.
I think that's a good place to end the podcast, is on the hope of normalcy.
Yes, the hope of normalcy.
And we will end this one here, I think, unless you have any other closing remarks.
Nah, I think we've done enough thinking today.
I'm glad y'all learned something. I'm sure you did.
I hope y'all learned something. If you didn't learn anything, you're probably a lot smarter than us.
I was gonna say, I hope you learned something. I didn't.
Well, that's the thing. Before we end, isn't that funny how the acquisition of knowledge, instead of making you smarter, all it does is just make you realize how little you know.
Right.
The more you find out, the more you realize how much you don't know. That's what getting smarter is.
Yeah. You realize you're a small little speck in the universe and you'll never know anything. Wow, we ended on a good note. Now we can end on
You turned it bad. You turned it bad.
I feel like you turned it bad. Hey, guys.
No! I don't think that was intrinsic. We'll talk to you next week.
See ya.